I saw an interview with you after your 2-0 win your freshman year of college versus Washington. You actually scored both goals in that game, and both goals actually had quite a unique celebration. Is there a reason you don't celebrate as much anymore? You know, maybe, for example, like the Soldier Boy celebration you said you would do for the Fault
I
Liners?
know. Well, that one I just haven't scored on that end. To be honest, like I feel like most of my goals come like in away games, so it's kind of like time and place. But yeah, I definitely have to score first to kind of get some of those celebrations, and we got to be, I think winning to kind of hit some. But you know, I've been in locker with Wando too much, and all he does is run back to the half field line. So I feel like that had the implant on me where it's like, okay, well, I guess we got to just keep playing.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's been a lot of times, like you said, we've been down, so it's like maybe don't celebrate 2-1 down.
Yeah, it's like gotta go grab the ball and get back to the win.
Yeah, definitely.
Your dad is a big time coach from what I've heard. When you go back home, is it kind of like, oh my God, there's Coach Yueill? Or is it, oh, that's USA player Jackson Yueill?
It is pretty funny because when I go back to Minnesota, it's always like winter time and cold. So I always try to look for, you know, a space to play and train. And so there's always like, he's always got young teams, you know, 14, 15, 16-year-olds. And so I always try to go and try to hog some space. And he likes to kind of play into it a little bit. And then they always kind of like love to ask questions at the end. So it's pretty funny to like kind of see, you know, his like role in Minnesota soccer, because it is pretty big. He does really well with the Minnesota Thunder Academy there. And there's always little kids who are asking for shoes and things to come back with, and so it's kind of funny, you know, everyone wants to like focus and pay attention to him, but you know, kind of you can see like glances, you know, when I'm running on the side or something, and so it's pretty fun for everyone, I think.
Do you feel like you grew up with a lot of, oh, he's the coach's son, that's why? Or do you feel like you earned your worth?
Yeah, it was definitely, I think he was my coach my whole youth academy until maybe U18s, U17s, 18s. But we kind of started off as a pretty local team, you know, from different places, but, you know, it was kind of you know, friends and family friends kind of joined this team, and then we kind of all grew up playing together. And so, I wouldn't really say that had a big impact on it. But definitely like maybe cause a little bit of risk sometimes, because, you know, your dad's your coach and, you know, you kind of want to separate a little bit, but it's kind of hard sometimes. And so you can be a little angrier, you know, when he's on you for the game, because you're like, you're not supposed to be like talking that way. And then so you can kind of have a little bit of rift that way. But I enjoyed it because, you know, that team was together since we were, you know, 8, 9, and 10, and kind of all the way through high school. So it was pretty fun.
You played in some really big games, whether it be the Nations League or some youth national team games, or even some of the MLS stadiums. What's like the craziest thing you've heard?
The craziest atmosphere, I think, would have to be the Nations League final, 2021 Nations League final, in Denver against Mexico. Zach got injured. Ethan came in, made the PK save. Then we got the PK, the fights, the, you know, water thrown, like I think hands and neck, and then Christian's PK goal, overtime. Everything about that was just insane. And like you kind of like come back in the locker room and you're like, oh my God, that happens. And I was like on the field for it all, and so it was like that's probably one of the crazier, you know, environments, hostile environment, because, you know, you're in the US, but it's a lot Mexican dominated crowd, and, you know, kind of crazy, you know, they're doing the you know, crazy things in the stand, crazy things on the field, you know, it's kind of a whole drama, and at the end you win and you're like, wow, that was crazy.
On the contrary then, what's it like going from that to then back to San Jose, where sometimes you guys have like only 9,000 at the game?
I think they're different, obviously. I mean, in terms of, you know, the size of the stadium is way bigger. You know, you play in this football stadium, and you know, that was a final. You know, a lot of the games are, I think the pressure of the game is a little bit different. I think, you know, you go to some US Open Cup games, you play some friendly games, you maybe don't have as big as crowds some games and bigger crowds other games. For us, you know, I hear it, but I don't hear it like to a crazy amount. So there could be not many fans in the stadium, and I'll kind of view it the same. I think there are certain instances and moments where, you know, 9,000 people can get really, really loud, and you kind of feel that momentum and feel that shift. And then there's also when 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 can be really quiet. So I think it kind of depends on, how the game is going, the momentum that we can bring and give the crowd. Whenever kind of step on the field, I think it's always cool playing in front of people.
This might be like a silly question, but this is coming from someone from the outside in versus the inside out. I'm just wondering, how do you guys even hear each other in those loud games?
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's a bunch of games, especially, recent one, like the Nashville game, when there was this huge moment of momentum that we were having, one, I think we were doing really well at that moment. So you don't really talk, you kind of just play. But there's also, I think guys in a lot of leagues and a lot of teams, learn how to whistle because it's so hard to you lose your voice. There's certain places where they'll be 10 feet away and you're yelling at them and maybe they're just ignoring you, but most of the time it's very hard to hear. And so, a lot of the importance is hand signals and hand gestures and kind of just knowing what to do and trying to find certain moments to communicate, because at most you're getting off is right or left because they can't really hear more than that. And so there are certain places where it is very difficult, which is a huge advantage, especially when it does happen at PayPal. It's people can feel under stress, especially the opposition.
In the NBA, they have this thing called the welcome to your league moment. It's where you've been the man your entire life, and then your first game in the league with all these other guys, you get dunked on or posterized in your very first play. What was your welcome to the league moment?
Not really in terms of oh man, they got me. I think it was just, for me, it was the introduction into, being around men and just the physicality. And, you had, when I walked in the locker room, it was Victor Bernardez. And, this guy was huge and I was so intimidated of being tackled by him and, fearful of, being around guys like Wando and we had even Shea at the time was kind of scary to be around because he's okay, this guy's gonna nutmeg me and I'm gonna look foolish in training. Or so you kind of, I think at the beginning, try to get your feet wet. And so luckily I didn't have a dunking moment or something poster that I can remember. I'm sure someone will pull it up or post it for me, but to my memory, I've kept it all out.
Awesome.
So then how do you view seeing guys like Cade, Nico, Cruz, Emmy coming in at 14, 15, 16, 17?
There's something about, I think, the last 5 years of, U.S. soccer and, the progress that it's made. I look at a lot of these young guys, even I think Emmy signed when he was 14, Cruz and Nico 16, and they come in with a lot of personality, a lot more than I think me and JT kind of came at the same time. I think a couple of the younger guys, maybe at that older era, it was a lot older veterans, American, and now with these young guys, they have big personality and a lot of confidence, and so they're trying to meg the senior players, and they're trying to dunk on them and do things to them, and which is it's a great thing to see because it shows that they're not afraid to try. They're not afraid to put themselves out there at such a young age, and so I've been really impressed with those guys integrating into the first team.
How's your role changed from Cavello to Lucci?
Yeah, I think last year I think was just difficult. We had Matias started. We transitioned with Cavello, and it was kind of the interim role is interesting. I think there's an era of Matias, kind of fading out, and Lucci kind of getting hired, with still games left to go, and you have this transitional period. So during that time, it was focused on keeping the group together as much as we could. Trying to get wins, which we weren't really able to do all that well, and so it was a little bit strain on the mental aspect of everything. I think Alex had a really good kind of idea, and I think with more time, things could have been better in a different moment. So with his system, I think I was maybe not hesitant, but we weren't in the same mental, I think, mindset as we were with Lucci. I think when Lucci came in, he set his foundation, he set what he wanted to do, he set his tactics, his his values, his disciplines that he wanted everyone to kind of follow, and then you kind of go into that in a totally different way. And as Lucci, I think it's very clear for everyone on the field, what their role is to be, whether you're a starter or a sub or, you know what kind of phase of the game that you're going to be impacting and coming in. And so I think that kind of helps everything, whether I'm, a little bit lower in the buildup or a little bit higher trying to get into the attack. I think it helps a little bit more because we can be a little bit more flexible in that.
Off the back of that, might bring up the dark days, might bring up some PTSD, but I just want to know, can you take us through that time when you were center back through Almeida? Did you learn anything about the game, whether it just be a bigger appreciation for midfield or how to read it a little better?
If you want to vent even.
Totally. I mean, it was, you kind of, I don't even remember when it started, but you kind of like look at, I remember like looking at the roster and, we were chatting and he was like, look, we need to get all these players. I think we had like 7 or 8 midfielders, especially at the beginning of last year, when it was like those first games when I was, playing. And I think we had like 7 midfielders because we wanted to get everyone on the field. And initially I kind of liked the idea. It was supposed to be like a back 3 and me as like a sweeper. I think there was a couple games before that where I was, able to read out certain passes and plays, and he liked the man marking system. And so when a 10 would drop lower, I would step up with them, and the other 2 would kind of come back. So initially, it made sense. And at that time, it was I think the team was bought into how do we win with the guys that we have, because we know we have good players, we know we have a really good coaching staff, and it was definitely when it wasn't working, it definitely got on me a lot because I'm not a center back. Going against these big guys and defending and man marking was very difficult. I remember the game in Philly, it was like maybe 19 degrees playing center back against like Burke and some of these big guys, and I'm like, I do not belong in this position. Like this is not working anymore. And I think after that one, I went to go talk to him and was like, this is not working, and I can't do the whole year like this because this is not where your best is gonna like utilize me. So I understood the idea at the beginning, and then as it kind of went along, it got frustrating. But yeah, definitely don't miss the center back role.
Was that conversation like? Do you have more leeway since you're the captain and a veteran, or is it kind of like no, a job's a job?
Both. I think when he brought it up to me, it was how do I help the team win? And it was kind of the same. When I brought it back up to him, it was this, I don't know if this is gonna help the team win. So it wasn't like, no, I'm not playing there. Where it was more, look, if you need me there, I'll continue, but I don't think you're utilizing me well. And I think Matthias and Lucci and Alex, I think 3 recent coaches, I think all had really good demeanors and were open and receptive to even if they wouldn't take your advice, or they're pretty strict on what they're going to do, they would still listen and be open. If you talked with a pretty clear voice and you believed in what you were saying, they would be receptive to it.
Fun fact for you, I don't know if you played formerly known as FIFA, now the EAFC, but your Ultimate Team card can play both center back and center defensive mid, so EA still think you can play.
Well, we'll have to talk to them about that.
One thing I hear that must have been really difficult for you, at least that's what all the commentators say, was all the emotions and the legacy you had to live up to, taking the captain's armband off of Chris Wondolowski. What was that like? Especially when you had guys in the locker room like Shea, Chris, Wando, Tommy, even JT came in the same time around you.
I think one thing that we hear constantly about you is like how hard it must have been to be a successor to some of the people before you. What were the emotions hearing you were going to be captain after Chris Wondolowski and having a locker room with someone like Chris, someone like Shea, and even Tommy, who was so young when he came in? JT came in around the same time as you.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy because it's not at the time, when Matthias told me, all of those guys were still in the locker room. I think we were in the transition area. Jeremy just came, so Wando stopped playing as much. Shea wasn't as healthy as he was in years past, so he wasn't playing as much. And Tommy was still, kind of in and out. And when Tias told me, Wando was one of the first people to, or he's always one of the first people since I got in the locker room is to, give advice and say, you got this, and just say like, be you and ball out basically. And so having those guys there already, I think helped me because it saw them still being bought into everything. So everyone else who sees them as captain and sees them as leaders, it wasn't, an instant, cut it off and new person in this position. And so there was a bit of that transition period. But definitely, you look at Shay's numbers, how many games, how many goals, how many assists. You look at Wando's games, trophies, national team, goals, and everything. And it's a bit intimidating because of, what they showed on the field and what they're able to do on the field. So that part was definitely difficult. But I think, being in the locker room with them and, the locker room that they had created that I was able to walk into and that we created kind of together, I think made the transition pretty easy because there are a lot of people. I rely on Jeremy a lot. I rely on Christian a lot, Tommy a lot, JT a lot. So there's a lot of young guys who, as those guys were kind of, transitioning away, a lot of people stepped up into this role and took on responsibility and, maybe they don't wear the captain's band, but, they act and do things in a really mature way off the field.
You've been someone who's been on the cusp of first team action for the U.S. men's national team. Do you think San Jose's smaller market and or poor record has been a reason why you haven't quite made that next jump?
I think at the beginning, maybe in 2017, I thought, I was having some pretty good games toward the end of the year. Thought I was, Greg just got hired. I think it was 2018, 2018. Greg got hired for the 2019. I was hoping to get. I think we still had a bad year, so like, I don't want to bring up those bad memories, but yeah, we had a pretty tough year. But I thought I was doing pretty well, and Greg was just getting hired. He wanted this new young player pool, and I think I missed the first like 2 or 3 camps of that year. Maybe it was 2019. Maybe I'm getting my days. Yeah, 2019. And then Matthias came in, and I think we started getting a little bit of hype. We started doing well, and then I finally got called. So you can kind of, I think at that time I was like, okay, I was overlooked at that time, and now that we're doing good, the hype and media and everything, maybe it kind of brought a little bit more spotlight on me. But I think, even in our tough moments, I still think, they relied on me and called me up. I think with the national team in recent years, it's, you look at the player pool that just came out and the quality in the midfield and all around. And, it's a difficult spot to be in. It's difficult to make the roster. I think even if you're on these high teams and performing in Champions League or performing in CONCACAF Champions League or MLS Cup, it's a difficult roster to make. And I definitely take it on myself that, I kind of let that go a little bit. And sure, you have to perform well, you have to win, you have to do well with your club to keep making on those teams because they want guys who are winning. They want guys who are performing really well with their team and for their team. And so that's definitely, part of the motivation for me always in a recent, especially before the World Cup and now that it's coming here again, it's, okay, if you want to be back in that roster and in that pool, you have to prove that you can win with San Jose and win with your team and be one of the best players and one of the best teams because that's who they're looking at. They want the top players, the top teams.
Can you then take us through the difference of having maybe a smaller role on that Nation League team and then coming back to a team where you're the captain, but that team is not doing too well? Can you take us through the differences between the two?
Yeah. I would say, both rosters are very similar. I think there's such a, in both teams. So what I want is those two teams because that's kind of, what I've seen in the past years. But I definitely talked to other players and other teams, and I think with San Jose, maybe you have a limited budget, a harder time to recruit players, so you have these guys who are kind of all equals, and I think that's kind of how we see each other. We don't get the $15 million player, the $20 million player who's coming here, the guy on $6 or $7 million. So you don't have this big gap of ego And so for me, it's a lot easier to kind of, navigate that in terms of, look, you're young, you're still proving yourself. You can't walk out of training. You can't like throw a tantrum in this. And with the national team, I think you have some guys who are at these big clubs who do see these big ego players who do try to, they do really well, and maybe they try to replicate some things, and they latch onto some certain bad habits. So, but I will say, when guys are in camp and when they're with the national team, they're fully focused. They don't care about the ego. They don't care about, how much you made or what you won this year. It's just about those games at hand. And so I try to take some of that, some of those guys who do play in Champions League finals, do play in big games, how do they go into those games, and how do they, kind of communicate with everyone? And, that's what I try to bring back to San Jose a lot too.
Nice.
I think it's only fair then, because I have also interviewed former roommate Jack Skane to ask a similar question. I asked him, what's the difference between that line of like, because a lot of the times you guys were facing each other, like in the midfield when he was on the reserve team and you were on the first team, so you would be matched up against each other. And what is that difference between, God, I need to lay this guy's ass out and I need to ride home?
Yeah, I think a lot of things that happen on the field stay on the field. Not really much gets brought back. Maybe you're angry for the day and you kind of like go home early and you don't talk to them, and then you come back in tomorrow and you do the same thing. But that's part of it. That's the competition. It doesn't really matter how old or young, or if you're roommates with them or not. I think if me and JT laid into each other all the time. If Jack came and crunched me a few times, I'd probably be a little angry depending on what day it was. If it's the day before the game, that's totally different versus the Tuesday and we're trying to get something out of like an 11v11, the small sided. That's the competition of he wants to win just as badly as I do. And so I think that's a totally different thing. But I think I like it. You see guys getting scrappy in trainings. You see the young guys, you see the old guys. It's not really dirty ever. It's just it's intense. It's wanting to win. And when a call doesn't go your way, you kind of get angrier and you can kind of get into some of these tackles and some of these brawls. And I think it's good. It's a place to kind of let that stuff out. And but as long as it stays on the field, I think it's totally cool with me.
Was there ever a tackle and afterwards you kind of just looked at him and been like, should have took out the trash?
Nah, I'm a clean player.
Okay.
You grew up in Minnesota and then you played soccer in UCLA. Pretty opposite temperatures, freezing cold or blistering hot. Can you take us through the differences of each?
Yeah, so in Minnesota, it's actually pretty unique. So I think every sport can't function in the wintertime. So they put up these domes for basically 6 months of the year. So you actually have pretty good conditions. You're playing, it's cold outside, but inside the domes, it's pretty warm. It's turf. It works really well. And, but definitely challenging in some of those, late autumn kind of months. It can definitely get quite chilly. And then, when it got to UCLA, it was kind of the reason that I went there, because, I kind of wanted to get out of the Midwest. I wanted to be away from the snow, even if it wasn't just for soccer. It was to see the sun, be around like the heat and the warmth. And, I really liked it a lot better, just kind of being able to sweat a little bit differently, but it definitely can get hot there. You go to some of the places like kind of around the area and it's 11 o'clock, you're training, you're trying to find, especially with the college schedule, you're training at weird times in the spring and kind of closer to summertime. And so you're doing fitness. And so that was definitely it is quite toasty here and very challenging. But the reason I went out there, so I can't complain too much about the heat.
Yeah.
Growing up in Minnesota, who do you even look to be inspired by soccer? Like, what got you into it? Especially when hockey and football are such predominant sports there.
Yeah, so I actually went to, so my whole family kind of played soccer, so kind of like had that. And then all my friends, who I grew up with were kind of all soccer players. But it's definitely still a hockey, community. So I kind of did the both growing up. I went to a Montessori school who had this after school program where we played, played floor hockey, we played soccer, we played like softball, baseball, and then we played like flag football. So kind of like from kindergarten through 8th grade, grew up around all the sports, loved all of them, and then, played ice hockey as well, and then soccer. So was big family, sports, I think was a big part of our childhood and growing up. And then there just became a point where, I didn't grow until like later in high school. And, I think early in high school was kind of the decision of, soccer or hockey, which one would you want to do? And I think the majority of my friends at the time were more soccer players. It just made more sense for me to kind of go on that route. And, I'm happy I did that, but it was definitely fun, growing up and doing all the different sports. But people I looked up to were, it was difficult because there wasn't really, I think they were NASL at the time, Minnesota Thunder, and it was kind of far away. So, going to soccer games was challenging. So I didn't really have like a specific person, maybe you watch the Prem certain mornings, if not that I was waking up that early at at that young age, but you had, I think, maybe the Uniteds at the time, the Barcelonas at the time, who were, these big superstars. I remember Beckham came and played in Minnesota one year, and I got to meet him at the airport, and so that was definitely one guy who I was like, oh, these are like superstars, and these are cool people. But it was more just like playing with my friends and at the park, and then growing up, I think that what kind of kept me involved in soccer.
Is there a part of you, and I don't mean to get you in trouble, but was there a part of you on draft day that was kind of like, oh God, if Minnesota just had taken me?
Yeah, so they were the first pick, and definitely during that time I was like, oh my gosh, it would be the coolest thing ever to go, get drafted by Minnesota. One of the first, maybe the first, second, I can't remember. First, second overall, this would be the coolest thing ever. And time I kind of knew that Abu would be, because he had such a good profile and such a good college career, but definitely when they were in it and there was a possibility, I was like, wow, this could be one of the coolest things, going back home. But again, I had to deal with the cold, and I'm happy San Jose picked me, because weather's a lot nicer here.
Yeah.
I know you're into mythology. Has any of that found its way into your pregame ritual?
No, not really. But I like story, so it's kind of like fascinating. I think history and story kind of blended together a bit. But no, I kind of got this back, I think, my rookie year, and kind of just thought it was cool. And then kind of learned a little bit about the story, and kind of just have worn it ever since. So it's kind of, I guess, an everyday ritual, just to wear it.
Same question then for anime, because I know you're a big fan of anime.
No, it doesn't really make its way into kind of pregame. I kind of just watch that. It's kind of more free time, kind of entertainment. But definitely, I think we'll throw on some like random fight videos, trying to get hyped a little bit, and maybe the night before or something. But it's actually not a bad idea. Maybe I should throw that on.
All right, if you win though this Saturday, I'm taking credit.
Yeah.
And then if we don't, I'm editing this part out.
It's no secret San Jose's record hasn't been the best in the past. As the captain, how do you get the guys to keep going? Because I'm sure after a while, you can only say, oh, don't worry, we'll get them on the next one, or unlucky so many times.
Yeah, it's challenging, because I think you kind of get into this, almost this loop of, oh, it's going to happen again. If you're up a goal, and then it's like, oh, they're going to come back because, we just can't find a way to win. And so I think it's almost taking a step back and a step away, and kind of reassessing. If you're kind of just trying to pound it down, I think that's what we've kind of done in the past. It is kind of that keep going, just keep believing, keep doing this. And I think this year there's been a little bit, you can rely on, I think, different elements of the team to kind of get us back on track. And I think, it's definitely part of the thing of learning. I think, when I did become captain, 2 years ago, I still was pretty young and pretty, unsure of certain moments and how to navigate. And so I think that's something that I'm still learning how to do. And it is, how do you get the guys, even though they are motivated, how do you get them thinking in the way that they were thinking when we were winning, or, when we were playing our best, how do we transition from, not that loop, or how do we break that loop almost? And so it's, switching something up. Does the guy do we need to go and have like a team outing? Do we need to go and change the way that we're preparing for the game, and how we do training sessions for the week? And it's kind of along the coach's philosophy as well. So I think he kind of step in that as well. But I think it's communicating with guys in certain positions, and trying to fix what's not working. And you can't really always go back to it's like, oh, this is what we were doing. It's still like, okay, what do we have to improve? Because sometimes you plateau a little bit, and you don't evolve. And so I think it's certain things of okay, how do we elevate our game almost. And so that's kind of the message that I try to give people. And it's, and like I tell them, you can be down for a little bit, but you gotta get out of it. You gotta pull yourself. You can't stay down forever, because then you keep that loop going. So
Yeah.
it's kind of that message basically.
I don't know if shy is the right word to use, but you're definitely more reserved, especially when I first met you. How was it having to take the captain's armband and then you're in the locker room and you're like, oh, now I gotta go say something, I gotta be more vocal? Or like, how does that transition?
Yeah, totally. I think at the beginning, it's that comfort zone thing. I think sitting back and letting other people do it. When I wasn't, with the armband, and that transition period was, I think, challenging. Kind of you sit down in a locker room, and then you like, no one's speaking. You're like, oh, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be the one who's saying something, and you kind of like get triggered that way. And I think with practice, honestly, it gets easier. You realize that the guys want to hear a voice, and want to hear even if it's not the right things a lot of the time, it's just something that kind of I think gets them out of their head. Gets, especially when something's going down, you get a little bit of a hopeful message, an encouraging message, or like a kick in the ass message. It's like, so I kind of think it's like the way that the last kind of year and a half have gone. I think it's definitely been tough moments, and you've seen, I think, that in my 7 years here, there's been challenging times. And I think it's honestly kind of a blessing. It's kind of been tough in those moments, but you see how bad it can get at certain moments. And that's kind of the message. It's, guys, we are much better than we were before, but we have to keep going, and keep improving in this or that. And so definitely it took a while, and it's still, I think, something that I'm trying to learn and improve. Because like you said, I think it is not really was my nature at the beginning, when I joined the team. But I think it was a great honor to be given captain, and good responsibility. And with that responsibility, you have to grow, and you can't just be focused on yourself. You're focused on other people, and you gotta talk to them, and get to know them, and then try to get the best out of them. So that's, like, I think one of the better parts to think of, looking back at the last couple of years that I've been really fond of.
What is that line between giving a super great speech and being a little more realistic, like, come on guys, we want to win the Open Cup? Or on the other hand, and I even remember Wando doing this a little more behind the scenes. It was one of my favorite moments from a few years ago. I think it was his final season. You guys gave him a wine bottle after an achievement, and he's like, I'm not opening this until we win MLS Cup. And everyone was like, yeah, rah, rah, rah. And then it kind of settled down, and then he kind of went, or maybe if we just make playoffs. And then everyone was like,
yeah, I think there's moments, and I think you kind of can realize, what kind of game you're playing, or what kind of, where you're playing it. I think there was certain times, this year, that I think, the way I wanted to go into it, I'll go for the Tigres game. I think, we needed to win. We're at home. We're playing, really, really good Mexican side. And so I think for that one, I was a little bit more, an edgier, voice to the speech. I don't want to say like, okay, we got to win 6-0 and we're going to be MLS Cup champions. It's a lot of it, my philosophy, and, speaking with Lucci and a lot of the people, it's, this is a one moment at a time, scenario. And, we're not at the final whistle, we're like just getting to it. And so there's certain, like, I think, words and, kind of, emotions that I like to try to imbue into some of the way that I can speak before a game, to try to get, a certain, edge out of it. And then I think there was one, against Philly, who we played at home, where it was a little bit more, comical, where it was just, you know, something simple where like I said, Jamiro's gonna like take us all out if we win. And that was it. Like it was just like, let's just help this guy get some revenge or something. And so it's kind of, I think, you know, he kind of mixed it up. I think that's kind of the fun part of it. You know, it's trying to read, you know, the emotions and dynamics of the guys in the locker room. But you know, just trying not to put too much pressure, but you know, apply enough where, you know, we have to come out flying like the Salt Lake game. You know, it's so I think it's kind of some fun to try to do. It's definitely something you kind of get wrong sometimes, something you get really right sometimes, and you gotta keep trying. And the guys respond, and guys know that you know, they go into the game in their own way and try to, you know, motivate themselves in their own you know, kind of format and words. But yeah, there's definitely some key, I think, elements that you can kind of learn throughout your tries of doing them.
Did Jamiro actually end up taking everyone? Because I know you did have an upset versus Philly this year.
Yeah. He didn't. He still owes us.
Okay.
Before I go into my quick fire segment, there is one question that I ask every single time on all of my interviews, and every single one of your teammates has actually unanimously chosen you without even questioning it. The question is, who has the best drip on the team? So where does your sense of fashion come from, and what does it mean to you?
I think, you know, looking back, I think, you know, growing up in Minnesota, there wasn't really like much of a, you know, fashion kind of sense. You know, everyone just wore the same thing. So I kind of got introduced, you know, my roommate at UCLA, and I think grew up in LA, you know, he kind of grew up a little bit more, he just grew up cooler, you know. I think, you know, the things that he wore, the things that he did. And so I think I took a lot of that on. You know, I got to live with him for a bit, and you know, I played with him soccer, you know, growing up, so I've known him for quite a while. But then seeing, you know, the way he acted, you know, the friends he kind of introduced me to, you know, I started kind of seeing a little bit more of like, oh, clothes are like a statement, and they're something that I think, you know, it's something you can like have as a personality, where it's you can feel confident, where you can feel like you can feel cool, and you know, these guys look cool. And so it was kind of that like saying, this is a cool thing to wear, this is the in thing to wear, you know, even if it's something simple like white Vans or something, where it's this is something cool, this is something college, this is something you know, pre-game, this is something, you know, just an everyday fit. So I kind of enjoyed that. And then you know, kind of coming to you know, the professional athlete role, felt it was almost like not a mandatory thing, but something where it was like, okay, now you really can have an ability to, you know, come into game day looking really cool, or if you want to like wear a certain outfit, you know, you kind of have a little bit more of that expression that, you know, it's not like it was allowed, but it was allowed like more so. So I kind of found it really enjoyable to kind of be around it and see it and still do. So I appreciate all my teammates for saying that.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be walking in the next pack saying, hey, best dress coming through.
All right, quick fire questions. Favorite restaurant?
Oh, dang, Kenji.
Best away game?
Minnesota.
Worst away game?
Houston.
The Heat?
Heat, and you always get delayed. Every time it's delayed.
Yeah, it did get delayed this year. Yeah, that's hilarious.
Favorite mythology fact or story?
The Eye of Horus one. I have a weird one. I don't know if it's really true. I don't know if you want to hear it or not.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But okay, so what I understood of it is, I think you know, Horus was, I think, his like uncle or older brother, you know, chopped him up in a whole bunch of pieces and like spread him out, and then he had to be like found, and so like the eye was somewhere, and I think his son ended up finding all the pieces except for his penis.
Oh yeah, crazy.
I don't know if that's true, so I might have to look that one up again. But it's something that I read once, and
That's gotta be one of your pregame speeches now.
You won't find that one piece.
Yeah.
Other than you, best drip on the team?
Best drip? I would say probably Carlos Capo.
Yeah.
On the contrary, who then comes in thinking they have the best drip?
I want to say Cade.
Yeah.
I think Cade comes in thinking he's wearing something like cool, and it's like, wait a minute. I take that back. Actually, I take that back. Cade actually has some good. Nico comes in wearing like something where he's like, this is what I see all my friends wearing or something, and he wears it, and it's like, no, dude, That is that is not what you're supposed to be wearing. Like that is not what you're supposed to be doing here.
All right, time to ask a question that I asked former roommate Jack Skane. You and former roommates Jack Skane, JT, and you are stranded on a desert island. Most and least likely to survive.
Least likely is JT. Most likely, I'd probably have to stay myself.
Best part of the captain role.
I think the responsibility. I think it elevates, what I have to do and who I have to be, and I think it's a good challenge to have, and yeah, it's the best part for sure.
And then the worst part.
When things go bad,
Yeah.
a lot of responsibility falls on you, and so it's kind of same answer. I think you kind of feel it more.